I know they've been taking him with Quinny. So I've always practiced in the penalties. Surprise penalty taker.
I'd gone to all the World Cup qualifying games that year with my uncle, and O'Leary certainly wasn't a name that we were familiar with.
We thought O'Leary were going,
no, stop, please, go home, someone grab him.
Just remember sort of almost sick, and I remember feeling how brave Dave O'Leary was, that he was quite willing to put his head on the block and step up and take this.
The nation holds its breath.
I actually remember the fact that I knew him when he was a kid. That when he was down, I was playing for Shelbourne under 17, and David was playing under 14 at the time. With Pierce, his brother, was playing there on the under 12s, and I remember the fact that I knew him, and here there was so much responsibility on him now.
David O'Leary, as indeed all his family, they're solid people. And if you were going to depend on somebody to do something for you, he's the kind of a man I would depend on.
The amount of pressure was huge, massive amount of pressure. And I said, no, he's not going to do it.
Yes, I knew. I knew he was going to do it. Everybody knew in the pub he was going to do it.
but we didn't really care that much. I mean, that's the great thing about it. You're blind drunk.
It did flick through me, Brian. It's amazing the number of instances or different facts can go through your brain in a split second. I thought about all the friction that had been while he was out of the team between himself and Jack Charlton.
I thought it was a very brave thing to do because he hadn't been in many of Jack's sides. He'd only come on as a sub. He's a centre-half, and the pressure was immense. So you wouldn't normally fancy centre-half with that kind of situation.
If I was ever in a situation like the Magnificent Seven, where there was only 7 of you to defend the whole village, O'Leary would be my first man. I'd say I look to my left, he's always going to be there.
When you got something big to do as a professional, when you're walking on a big film set, you've got a big scene to do. Nerves aren't any use to you. You have to get rid of them and focus on the job you're doing. I'm sure that's why O'Leary decided he was the man to take the job. He wouldn't have done it lightly. He wouldn't have said, I want this for the glory. He would have done it because he knew that professionally he had the capacity to do it. And maybe, I remember Jack saying, well, O'Leary of all people, a centre-half, we had other players who should have done it and everything. But I'm sure O'Leary knew that he was the man to do it out of all the guys that were there.
The very fact that it was he who stepped forward made me think that he was confident in scoring the goal that would put Ireland through. And so there was a kind of relief almost that, well, if it's O'Leary because he wants to do it, not because he's having to do it. And in that peculiar psychological process that goes on in one's own mind, never mind a player's mind, I came to the conclusion that this was a certainty almost, that he had to score.
Sort of conviction, which is the important thing, and the coolness and the decisiveness at that moment. He knew so much was riding on it. It was just an incredibly professional, and showed incredible depths of resolve and character.
I tell you what, there was, the emotions just poured out. I think we were all crying and hugging one another, and the crowd then, I mean, I saw grown people roaring and crying in the crowd as we went to them.
And I remember looking up into the stand and the different tiers of the stand, and I could not believe that there are so many Irish people there, and it was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary for one moment.
I think just everybody went berserk, and we certainly did.
We jumped up in the air, and we were delighted. It's not often that, I suppose, professional commentators would get to the point where they'd be jumping up in the air. People don't jump up in the press box, and they don't cheer either. So I think at that stage all professional objectivity had gone.
I would say in Hugh Hefner's mansion, at the height of his swinging Playboy parties, there was not a multiple collective orgasm to compare with what happened in the International Bar when that ball hit that net.
I remember just thinking how glad I was to be Irish and how glad I was to be a football fan, and I suddenly, I remembered how I felt really sorry for people who don't appreciate football or who aren't Irish. I just felt sorry for everybody.
Me and the man with the bad heart sank into each other's embrace, and there was kissing and hugging, and then you just wanted to get out of there, just get away from the scene of the crime, from the drama and the tension. And we went out into the street, and then the most amazing thing happened. To me, it was the most interesting thing of the whole Italian odyssey. All the men wanted to ring their mammies or their wives or their children. The way you do after a traumatic incident, you ring home, and this is the days before mobile phones. So there were queues of them, hundreds of men queuing around blocks waiting to get on the phone and sobbing down the phone to their mammy. It was terrible, but I'm all right now, mommy, it was... I'm talking about men 50, 60, 70, looking for comfort.
You just think that you'd reached an emotional peak. You'd experienced emotions you never knew you had, or you never knew you were capable of. And you thought, well, it can't get any better than this. And we went outside, and there was something called the River Parade of Innocence taking place on the Liffey. I think it was that night anyway. It might have been like the next match or the match before that, but I'm pretty sure it was that night. And just before all the madness started and all the kind of pretending to be Brazilians jumping in fountains and, taking down your trousers, there was this moment of like sort of respite from the whole thing, where suddenly, you went into a completely different zone, and thousands, millions of candles start floating down the Liffey, and this was in honour of the Birmingham Six, and it was the latest stage in the efforts to get them released. And it was just this amazing kind of conflict of emotion, because on the one hand you were really, really happy and up and buzzing and everything, and then the next thing, and you kind of took this moment like, and then that passed, and then we got on with it.
I'm sure we went out and played football for hours after, thinking that we were David O'Leary or the lads in goal, thinking they were Packy Bonner, and that was the whole kind of inspiration of that World Cup.
There's a great story I heard actually about Dave O'Leary on the night. Was there was a woman in labour, and she wanted her husband to come back from the pub, and he couldn't come back because he said, I can't come back because the penalties are on. And she said, please come back. And he went, I'm not come back till the penalties are over. So the penalties were over, he came back to her, and he had to drive her to the hospital because she went into labour, and she was in tears, in bits, and he was absolutely hammered, and he was driving the car down the street was packed, and he was letting people sit on his roof and on his bonnet, okay, and she was crying, please get me to the hospital, please. He was going, love, where else would you see it, and then her window was open, and she was crying with the pain, and another bloke, a fan, stuck his head in the window and went, it's alright, love, I shed a few tears myself earlier on.
It was a great moment. I mean, it was a great moment for everyone in the country. And I know people who weren't, someone very close to me who wasn't into football at all and had resisted the whole Jack Charlton era until that point. And then they sort of got involved in it because the drama or melodrama of a penalty shootout pulled them in.
I honestly believe that it was the start of the Celtic Tiger. People then began to believe in themselves. Here were Ireland in the quarterfinals of the last 16 of the World Cup, a thing no one in their wildest dreams ever dreamt of. And we were there playing Italy in Rome above everything. So, you know, it started the belief in the Irish. And
I suppose what it did was it lifted the nation's spirits. I mean, there's no doubt but that it did that. And that is no small thing. In many ways, that's far more important than the effect, you know, 2p in the pound or something has out of a budget. For people to suddenly feel lighter in their step as they go into work, for people to greet strangers on the bus with a smile, that's no small thing.
I was miserable myself, and most people I knew were kind of miserable. Everyone in Dublin was kind of walking around grumbling before the World Cup. Unemployment was massive. You know, it was before the economy started to grow and everything. And, you know, it was exactly what the country needed. It was a huge tonic, huge lift. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that it was instrumental in turning the economy around. And again, it just emphasises the importance of sport, and football especially.
I think it was a marvellous moment in Irish popular culture, in Irish folklore, and people will always remember where they were when they saw that goal.